I'm Daniel. I'm the co-founder of Recarb. Recarb, we're a German-based company, a nature tech company. And what we do is we digitalizing the process of due diligence and risk assessment for nature restoration projects. Because that's quite a complex task, and every one of you that's dealing with nature restoration, I hope to get to know you a little bit better later on and to understand what you're doing. So everyone that is active in that field really knows, I think, how complex this topic is. And I want to start actually this case study we did with a Brazilian company because our main area of operation right now is Brazil. We are working in Atlantic Forest, Cerrado, and the Amazon. That's where we started with our product to test it and to do the first case studies. And I want to start actually with a little, with a little question for you. So imagine that you have a rich aunt or a rich uncle, and you just received $10,000. And you decide, okay, you need to decide what to do with this money. And let's have a look at two situations. Situation A, imagine you have then decided to invest that money into shares, into stocks of a company. And yeah, you take that sum of money from your savings, from the money you received, and you give it to a bank to buy shares. However, you don't know which company your money will be invested in and how good the company really is, or what you will get as a concrete return on your investment. Situation B, you want to invest in these shares of a specific company with this money, but before you can buy them, you have to do a 4 to 6 month of research and collect and analyze numerous numbers and documents. How would you feel about that? So situation A, you would like to invest, but you really don't know. The bank is not telling you where they invest the money. What is your return on investment? I guess, any answers? No? Okay. Yeah. I think the answer is clear, right? So no one of us would just invest any money in shares of a company that we don't really know what kind of company this is, how good this company is, and what our return on invest is. And we also would not invest if we have to spend as a private person invest $10,000 in something and have to spend 4 to 6 months to do an analysis and research about the stocks and to understand about the investment before we do it, right? But to be very honest, I mean, this is what is currently happening in the nature restoration market. A lot of people invest in nature restoration, for example, through carbon offsetting, buying CO2 certificates, buying carbon offsets, but don't really understand what they are buying. So I would like to skip the agenda and directly jump in. And the problem with that is that a lot of people don't really understand the risks that come with nature restoration projects. And the problem begins actually with the definition of nature-based solutions from my point of view, because the concept of nature-based solutions or nature climate solutions, how we call it, has been defined by many different organizations. For instance, while the IUCN framing puts biodiversity and human well-being at the heart of nature-based solutions, the EU Commission, for example, is framing, or the EU Commission framing puts economy and social assets as priorities, while sustaining environmental conditions. It is still difficult to implement nature-based solutions without a very precise definition, criteria, and guidelines for implementation. And any gaps in the definition or implementation guidelines could give room for risks associated with the concept itself. So I mentioned offsetting. Offsetting is a huge topic here, and was in the last years, because people were, or most of the organizations were approaching nature restoration through the objective of offsetting, right? And there are a few problems with that. So the IPCC and other experts point out that natural systems are affected and often harmed by climate change, right? So the more the planet warms, the less effective many of these nature-based solutions will become over time. That means they cannot be a substitute for emission reductions, we all know, but are merely a one piece of an urgent response to the climate emergency. The challenge is how to direct funding towards well-planned nature-based solution projects that do not further delay decarbonization. There is actually a very good article about that already from 2021, and getting the message, it's called Getting the Message Right on Nature-Based Solutions to Climate Change. It was published in the Science magazine, Global Change Biology, for everyone who's interested in that. So the problem is, if we only see nature-based solutions as a substitute for reducing emissions and just say, oh, we need to offset our emissions and we just need to plant some trees on a short notice, and just let's see that we plant enough trees that suck carbon out of the atmosphere. That's not the right thing to do. So, but a lot of companies and a lot of organizations did that. So there are a lot of performance risks coming with these restoration projects. There's a very high failure rate. A recent study from Oxford University found that up to 50% of these projects, nature-based solutions or nature climate solution projects, failing because they are not set up in a right way. We have further risks that coming with these restoration projects or nature restoration projects are project developer risks. So we have seen that you all might have read about these articles in Guardian and in other media and press, where just project developers didn't do it right. So there was just one motivation. Again, a lot of motivation came from the offsetting industry. Let's just plant some trees that suck carbon out of the atmosphere. But nobody had really a detailed look into the project developer itself. So the prior conduct and performance of the project developers that do that. There's a lot of supplier risks, there's reputational risks for organizations, there's a lot of financial risks coming with that. And we see a lot of projects failing, and people losing, not only people losing money, but indigenous people, for example, losing their land. A lot of things went wrong in that regard. And we have this carbon accounting risks as well. So because a lot of carbon sequestration models make just estimations based on generalized parameters, and not taking into account a specific restoration strategy, a specific biome, and a specific tree species, for example. So yeah, a lot of risks coming with these projects. And as I said, the problem with that is, and yeah, it's unfortunately still the case, today we have de-risking is not happening in a lot of ways, in a lot of organizations. It's often happening that there is no due diligence at all. So just let's say a sustainability manager or whatever in an organization says, oh, we need to offset something. We need to buy some carbon offsets. We would like to do something good. We would like to invest money into restoration or nature projects, but there's no due diligence happening. That often happens with over-the-counter deals for carbon offsetting, as I said. And yes, unfortunately, it still happens, and we see that every day. A second point we are seeing is that a lot of organizations rely on third-party data. So they use data from project design documents, from certifiers, from data that is already out there or any databases, and say, okay, well, we have a clear picture about if the project developer or the nature restoration project, whatever, is any good. We know it because we just check this data, but nobody really uses, or a lot of people don't use first-hand data. And then we have a third case, which is that in that cases where there is a solid and thorough due diligence happening for nature restoration projects, that it takes a long time and costs a huge amount of money. So we spoke to a lot of companies in the US in the past, and there are big companies doing due diligence, and that's exactly their problem because when you want to do a detailed due diligence, as I said at the beginning, that's a really complex topic. So you need to gather data. In a lot of the cases, they open up a data room on Google Drive or whatever, and they gather this data, and a scientific any agency or whatever a consulting company developed a methodology for due diligence in an audit of these kind of projects, and it takes a lot of time. So, and the questions is then how to solve that. So how we solve that, I want to refer to the case study later on. First of all, what we do is we are specialized in risk assessments. So we take care of these specific projects and make sure that projects have a great due diligence, first of all. You can also say we are like an S&P Global for financial, what S&P Global is for financial information, Recarb is for information about nature restoration. So what we do is we do an in-depth scientific evaluation of projects in the design phase. What we did, we created a risk assessment and management platform that can save organizations up to 80% of the efforts they are having today to do risk assessment. And we help organizations with that to make well-founded investment decisions. We are a team of engineers, scientists, and doctors from forestry and nature finance. And a lot of people we're working with have decades of experience in that area. And what it is doing, our platform, is that is a structured digital process. It's biome specific. So that means we look at specific biomes like Amazon, Cerrado, Atlantic Forest, and we're doing the same right now, preparing an assessment for different biomes in Europe because of the new nature restoration law in Europe that's coming up. That is a structured digital process. It's a comprehensive verification, and it's empowering investors and giving them the right data to make the right decisions. So we also say it's a kind of 360-degree view on nature and on communities, because without the communities, without ITLC, we cannot do a proper due diligence. So due diligence is needed. It's absolutely clear, but the way how it works, so as I said, in a lot of ways, nobody's doing a due diligence. In a lot of ways, it's too complex. It takes so much time. So we found that issue and said, okay, we need to change that because investors will only spend a huge amount of money on restoring nature when they trust the market, right? And without reliable data, there is no trust. And without trust, there is no scaling of the ecosystem restoration market. And without scaling this market to restore nature, no sufficient measures to solve the biodiversity crisis. And so the prerequisite for project developers, and we are on a two-sided market here, right? We have on the one side, we have the project developers, and that's the case study I'm talking about today. And on the other side, we have the buyers, so organizations investing into nature restorations for, as I said, different motivations, right? The one doing this for offsetting, and the companies or organizations that want to do it right really do not only care about offsetting or carbon sequestration, they really care about long-term goals and restoring nature in the right way. So the prerequisite for project developers looking on that side of the market is therefore to give investors precisely this confidence for investing into nature. And as we know, and as we also probably know, I mean, we have a huge nature finance gap, right? We have on the one side, we have a biodiversity crisis, but on the other side, we have a huge nature finance gap. It's about a 700 billion nature gap that we need. We need more money to restore nature, but it's hard to invest. And so this requires, from the project developer side, from our point of view, a solid database and ideally a neutral assessment in a long-term monitoring of the investment, at least as long as the project is in a high risk phase, so the first couple of years. So for every financial asset, and coming back to the beginning of my presentation, you invest in a company, we have perfect data for that, right? We have perfect data. So when you ask an S&P Global or Morningstar, they have tons of data about companies. They read financial reports, they do an annual report assessment, they go into the companies, do an assessment of the companies, analyze financial data. We do this for our financials perfectly, but we don't do it for nature. And that's really a problem. So what did we do? And let's jump in briefly into this case study we did with a Brazilian project developer. So how do we start this due diligence and risk assessment process? Well, first of all, it's very crucial to understand the success factors for a nature restoration projects. Secondly, collaboration with experts and especially local stakeholders is very crucial. That's the second point we identified. And the third one is the in-depth scientific evaluation we do. Let's talk about success factors, the first point I mentioned. It's about to understand the main processes required in ecosystem restoration, which helps us to understand the risk drivers and understand the indicators and value ranges per region around the world. That's a very, very important thing. So we need to understand the main processes required in ecosystem restoration. And when talking about in-depth scientific evaluation and collaboration with experts and stakeholders, so when we understand what our success factors are in restoring nature, we also understand that ecosystem restoration is a complex process, as I said many times already. So that should happen in concert with local governments, landowners, indigenous people in local communities, and organizations that have been involved in conservation, management, and restoration of local ecosystems for many years. They are there. They are really there, but many people don't take that into account. So this ultimately leads us to a detailed scientific collection and analysis of the data. This means a combination of evaluating the latest scientific findings, studying the literature, collecting primary data on the ground, which is a very crucial thing, and a lot of companies don't do. So ground truthing, very, very important. And through detailed interviews with project developers and local stakeholders and using secondary data. Yes, there is also room for secondary data. We can also not do without it, but we use primary data first. And we also rely on organizations and work together with organizations like IUCN, Integrity Council, OECD, TNFD, and WBCSD, and many others. So what we do first is the data collection. And what we did is we gather, and what we do always is we have contracts with project developers. We gather firsthand data from the project developers, and we developed our own, within the last year, we developed our own carbon sequestration model and methodology, which is crucial to understand the carbon sequestration potential of different tree species. So we created a database with over 700 tree species available to be able to do the right modeling and the best modeling for carbon sequestration. The data collection is happening with the project developer in a digital process. So it's a standardized digital process, which allows us to have a much more efficient process later on, and to build a database with and patterns within, find patterns within the data, which makes it much easier later on also to identify and analyze data with the help of AI, for example. The second part we are taking care of is the risk assessment part itself. So we carry out the due diligence based on more than 200 criteria we asking the project developer for. And that's what we did with Alfenas Agricola in Brazil, referencing biome-specific benchmarks for each indicator. And the third part of it is the risk assessment report. It's a digital report created automatically out of all the data we gathered. And we deliver not only a report with the results and the rating of and the results of the report, we also deliver recommendations, specific recommendations, what to do as a result of this risk assessment process. So it's a digital and dynamic report, and it's frequently updated. also offering remote sensing data and field trips, helping us to keep that updated and see how the project is going. So let's quickly jump into the project phases. And I hope that, so please, if I'm too fast or if I'm getting too enthusiastic about the details, please remind me. There's a lot of things going on, and I just try to pick out some things here from the project and from the case study. So first of all, the project developer assessment. What are we doing? So we started the project developer assessment that began with delving into the financial conduct, the transparency and alignment with the highest standards of ethical and social responsibility, determining the financial soundness of the project developers and their suppliers is essential from our point of view, as restoration is a long-term and it's a risky and it's a complex investment, right? So, and often, especially big corporations invest into that. It's a game of millions. So so there are really some companies investing millions into that. And yeah, a successful restoration project depends also on robust controls and management practices. So let me give you 3 examples. So 3 examples of what we ask in this process is, for example, like, what are your recent financial performance highlights, including revenues, profits, and key metrics? So it's really like a normal due diligence you would also do when you would like to invest in a company from a venture capital point of view, for example. So we also asking that questions. And we are asking something like, does the organization have written financial management processes and procedures in place? Does the organization have a policy, code, or statement on fraud, anti-corruption, and that binds all of its personnel, etc.? So in this category alone, we identified around 70 questions and 70 points that should be clarified before an investor, an organization invests into a nature restoration project. The second one is carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration, so these are really processes that ensure the reliability of the carbon sequestration intent are equally important as 3 aspects that should be monitored and disclosed: or leakage, permanence, and additionality. I also think you're aware of that. And essentially, the aim is to determine if a project is adding to that geography, if the carbon would be sequestered, if that project did not exist, given existing regulations or natural processes, and if the project is being used to justify to cover deforestation happening somewhere else. Such considerations, such considerations are vital as the ecological and operational aspects of a project will facilitate the permanence of that forest in the long run. The sequestration, from our point of view, should ideally be calculated based on existing best practices and projects in that ecosystem using the specific restoration strategy. All these risks need to be considered, mapped, and disclosed at the beginning of the project. And as I said, we developed our own carbon sequestration methodology with a 700 for quantifying carbon sequestration for 700 species for a 40 years period, which is crucial. So we don't have the time, unfortunately, to go into the detail in this webinar today, but we recorded another webinar explaining our carbon sequestration methodology. So for every expert that really wants to dive deep into that carbon sequestration methodology, I can share the link, or we can share the link later on. So examples for questions that could be asked or we ask in the due diligence process in this area, we are asking about around 50 questions related to carbon sequestration in this due diligence process, is laws and regulations, for example. So given the current jurisdiction, would this forest in this area have been restored if the project didn't exist? We are asking for the obligation to restore. Is the project area subject to an obligation to restore? Has the ecological restoration, including carbon sequestration, ecological recovery achieved by the project been proven to go beyond what would naturally occur in the absence of a project, etc., etc.? So many more questions. When looking into livelihoods, livelihoods is really crucial to really, I mean, there are indigenous people doing that for decades and have lots of experience with that, right? And now we are coming from the Western countries and saying, oh, we understand how the things are going. That's stupid. But that was what happened, really, and what's still happening. So the livelihoods of those who rely on the forest in any given geography should then be taken into account, right? When establishing the project's chances of success. Indigenous people and local communities, as I said, they are equipped with traditional knowledge and they are responsible, by the way, and I don't know if you knew that, and it was also very surprising to me when we started this company, is they are responsible for sustainably maintaining and managing 80% of forests worldwide, 80%. And we also found out that areas that are home to these populations are 20% less likely to be deforested, 20% less likely to be deforested. The engagement, the consent, the knowledge, and the understanding of these indigenous populations are fundamental to the resilience of neighboring areas. And there are international regulations, there are standards, so we are not the first ones looking at that, right? And best practices, and we are also looked into that and see, okay, which of these best practices we can already use. For example, business like Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, so the TNFD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and others already looked into that, and we took that best practices and also spoke to local communities and people to how we can use that, and if there is anything we need to do differently as well, and make sure that the project has the specific points taken into account. So examples for questions that that could be asked here or we use for the due diligence process is, how does the project demonstrate that it meets legal and institutional frameworks? Can you, as a project developer, provide documentation demonstrating compliance with all relevant environmental laws and regulations in the region where you're located? Has the project carried out a participatory planning process in which communities define investment plans and governance models to manage land, etc.? For example, when we started, by the way, we have one pilot project in Colombia. We directly invested in that piece of land. We are working with a local project developer. And as we realized in the stakeholder consultation, well, there were very smart farmers out there that really knew a lot about the local tree species. I mean, we decided with the local project developer just to hire them, and they work with us and guide us through the whole process. That's really eye-opening and really great work that happened there. So how does the project or program establish flows or funds to the community? How many women are involved in a project governance? In what leadership positions do they hold, etc.? So many things that are important here. So for ecological recovery, the last one is, this refers to how the restoration intervention addresses and improves the ecosystem, considering its genetic diversity, habitat provision, protection, and the potential to establish connectivity and creative buffer zones. A crucial aspect of these processes is the identification and mitigation of threats and degradation drivers, right? So it is a sequence of processes that are often overlooked by providers that only look for quality of carbon credits, as I said at the beginning. So carbon sequestration, yes, it's an important part, but it's just a little part of that of a successful project. And for each biome, it is, for example, important to map and understand the ideal value range for the project seed bank potential, the methods utilized to control invasive species, and the role of existing tree remnants in promoting nucleation. Additionally, conducting a detailed review of historical land use patterns is crucial, and the degree of anthropization. Sorry, sometimes with some English words I struggle a little bit. The degree of anthropization, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, should be methodologically assessed in providing a detailed understanding of the project's environmental sustainability, right? And this throughout the life cycle. So because many companies, just organizations, I mean, they look for the first couple of years, let's say 1, 2, 3 years, and then forget about it. But that's not the right thing. So let me also give some examples here for questions we ask. So we start the initial assessment in the ecological recovery assessment, for example, with questions like property names, registration numbers, legal issues, looking into if there are any legal issues, looking at fire breaks, for example. They need project developers need to upload the drone imagery. We are looking into that. We are asking questions to assess the potential for natural regeneration. So, for example, we ask them, ask them to say, hey, specify the forest species that predate the restoration project underway or to be implemented. Many site preparation questions like how will invasive grass species will be controlled, etc., etc. So yeah, a lot of stuff. And so what is the result of that? The result of all this detailed due diligence process is a rating in 4 categories. In these categories I mentioned. So, for example, in this specific project and this case study, it came out with a rating of BB+. So, by the way, we are using the same rating categories than the financial industry, from AAA to D. So that any investor also can refer to that and knows what that means. And we are looking, and you're seeing just screen here of the digital report. We are showing with the traffic lights system, showing exactly in every single category what goes wrong with this project, what goes well, and we are explaining the project developer and the investor what needs to be done to get a better rating. So yeah, the report itself so clearly shows, as I said, where the project developer and the project stands in terms of quality and how this could affect financial viability and the optimization potential as well. So yeah, I guess that's it. It was a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. I tried to pick out a few things that were crucial in this case study. I hope that you that you could take some key points out of it. I'm also very open to connect with you later on. I mean, we are all in the same collective. We can also connect on LinkedIn. And what we're looking for really right now, we are still in an early stage. We put the product out this year. And after all the research and the work that has been done in the last year, in 1 year, and we are looking for funding. We are looking for clients for pilot projects, case studies, partnerships, and very open to that. And thanks a lot. And I'm looking forward to hear your questions.